Thank you very much. Good afternoon. I'm going to talk to you about what happens where you go where the insight takes you and where you follow it wherever it takes you. But I'd like to start by just taking you out for a minute of your work mind. So I'd like you to shut your eyes and think back to the last time you played some sport or took some exercise. And it really doesn't matter what exercise it was. You could be running for a bus, you could be running from a marathon, you could be working really hard in the gym. But what I'd like you to do is think about how you felt, what was happening to your body, and what you were thinking. And then I'd like you to tell me if it felt like this. You can open your eyes now. That's Jennie winning her gold medal in 2012. And when we think about sport and physical activity, and in particular when we come to sell it, this is what you see. You see extraordinary people doing extraordinary things. And if you're a woman, you see a body image and a level of achievement that is absolutely impossible to aspire to unless you are a professional athlete. And that method of selling sport and physical activity has led to this, the gender gap that was just described of 1.8 million people. When we decided to try and do something about this, that was how big the gender gap was. And I joined Sport England, as you just heard, in 2007, and I can't tell you how many of these charts I had looked at, to the point where I was so used to the pink line being below the blue line that I thought that's just what happened. And it took a really brave politician to say, but there's got to be something you can do. And I remember saying to her, it was a female Secretary of State, oh no, we do lots of women's projects and loads of stuff, and we've got this all sorted. Well, we so much have not got this all sorted with a gender gap of that level. So she very bravely said, would you like to do a communications campaign? And I very stupidly said, oh yes, I'll spend £10 million of public money on advertising. So I decided if we were going to do that, and I'm personally accountable for this because I am what they call the accounting officer, we were going to root it in the best possible evidence that we could find. So we produced a 600-page summary of all of the research that had been done into why women and girls didn't play as much sport and didn't do as much physical activity as men did. And it said all the conventional stuff. It said the thing we all say when somebody asks us. It said time is a real issue. Women have really busy lives, loads of stuff going on, it's really hard to fit it in. And it said money, it's expensive. Have you seen what a gym membership cost? Have you seen what those trainers cost? But the more we dug, the more we saw that there was something else going on here entirely. And it was going on between the ears, nowhere near the purse or the clock. This was about how women and girls felt, about themselves and about other women who were exercising and who were playing sport. And it was all about judgment. And it was the stuff that's actually really hard to say. It was things like, I feel too fat to do this. I look ridiculous in those clothes. People stare at me. Maybe people even shout at me in the street if I go out running. And that was what we wanted to tackle, because that all comes back to a principle about being judged. Because as women in particular, we're really, really good at thinking about judgment. We absolutely judge ourselves. We think every man judges us, and by God do we think every other woman in the room is doing the same. So that judgment absolutely had to be tackled. So we tried to break it down to what women were concerned about being judged on. Appearance is the most obvious. Everywhere we go, there are pictures of impossible women, not necessarily athletes, but women like that, who look extraordinary. There is then in ability in sport a really strange dynamic going on. Because if you're really good at sport, and this is really important if you're a teenager and trying to work out where you are in life, the risk is that you'll be called butch. Not that there's anything wrong with being butch, but if you're 15 and trying to sort out your sexuality, it's not necessarily where you want to be, or you're rubbish. And God, do we hate being rubbish at things. We are the gender that looks down the list of requirements for a job and finds the one thing we can't do, not the 15 things that we can. So ability is something we really judge ourselves on. And then there's all those other priorities. Family, study, looking after other people. For some reason, it is fine for dads to play football on Saturday, but not for mums to go to the gym on a Sunday afternoon. So there was all this competing stuff going on in the insight that we saw. So the creative needed to tackle this, but it needed to tackle it in a completely different way. So what we wanted to say was, first of all, if you feel a bit strange when you go out there and you get scarlet in the face, or you're worried when you see a treadmill, not how fast can I run, but will I fall off the back and look ridiculous? Everybody actually has that running through their heads. Everybody. Even those amazing looking women in the gym have that running through their heads. And if you feel like that, then where's your answer? What can you say about it? How can you say it's fine? And we wanted to make sure that it felt real, that it didn't feel like something an actress or a model or an elite sportswoman would experience, but nobody else. So we literally went out onto the streets to find the women who appeared in this campaign. Our agency stopped women who were running. They went into gyms, they went into classes, and that's how they recruited the women. And what we fervently did not want is to be patronised. The client group for this campaign was almost entirely women. The agency group was mixed gender, but we were all really, really clear, nothing patronising, and we'd like to smile a little bit. So we decided to put people like Grace on great big posters. So Grace is in her early 20s, student, rides that bike every single day, but is about as far away from a man in lycra as you can imagine. In fact, she puts the flower on the front of her bike to say, I'm just relaxing here, guys. I'm just riding my bike because that's what I feel like doing. And she's really slow. We had a digital execution of her going up a hill, and she's incredibly slow, but, who cares? That was absolutely fine. As she said herself, I'm doing something. I'm not sitting on my backside on the couch. And this is Sam, our runner. And I felt particularly for Sam because she'd only started running 6 months before we found her for the campaign. She'd just done her first park run when we took these photographs, and she comes second to last. And she was incredibly proud of it. And we put her on 16-foot billboards across the country. And she is the epitome of, I'm a middle-aged woman, I'm running, my body moves when I run, get over it. But she was absolutely prepared for that to be seen. And that representation of women playing sport and exercising really did seem to create a connection. So the attitudes changed. Those big purple blocks, which are bigger than the grey ones, show that women were saying, people like me are exercising. I don't worry so much when I exercise. And the category, that whole industry that talks about sport and activity, started to do some different things. To have a woman that size, she's a size 18 on the cover of Running magazine, would have been unimaginable just 2 or 3 years before. And Girls Make Your Move is an Australian campaign, and we have a partnership now with This Girl Can in Australia too. So people were starting to think differently, but most importantly, the numbers shifted. So after we had produced the campaign, we did evaluation all the way through. 2.8 million more women had done some or more exercise, and over 1.5 million of them were either doing it for the first time or going back after a long break. And 250,000 were doing it once a week, every week, over an extended period of time. It was the biggest shift we had ever seen in the figures of women exercising. So before I go on to talk about the second phase of the campaign, I just want to show you the film.
Let's go!
Hit me. Hit me. Hit me. Mississippi putting it down. I'm the hottest round. And if you want me, y'all can't stop me now. Is you with me now? Then biggie bounce. I know you dig the way I switch my style. Get your freak on. 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 People, here I come. Now sweat me when I'm done. Now people gather round. Now people jump around. Get your freak on. Get your freak on. Get your freak on. Quiet.
could.
So that's the 90-second version that we couldn't afford to put on the TV very much, but which did go around the world, was viewed tens of millions of times across the world. The next year, Missy Elliott was on the Super Bowl in the interval singing that song. I do take some credit for that, possibly unjustifiably, but she did have a resurgence. But even after that, it was really obvious there was still stuff to do. You don't get rid of centuries of conditioning by one advertising campaign, even if it is pretty effective. And there was this feeling that, oh no, we've done judgment, we've fixed that. Well, I've got news for you. We absolutely hadn't fixed it. And we also, all the insight, all the evidence was telling us that that thrum in your head that says, I'm not quite good enough and I'm actually a bit worried about this. And every time I go to a new class or I have a bad experience, I have to go through it all again. We needed to do something else. So we decided to have a go at a phase 2. And of course, much as we had put all those positive images out of women and girls playing sport and being completely comfortable in their space, the thrum of a different type of advertising was absolutely there as well. So we wanted to do a phase 2. But having done a really successful first film, it was quite challenging. And it felt even scarier, actually, second time round. So what we tried to do was to do something slightly different. Our age range for the first target audience in phase 1 of the campaign was 14 to 40. We wanted to push that because we got a fantastic response from some older women. So we wanted to try and go all the way to 60. Our agency thought we were totally mad then. When we actually put out the original brief that said 14 to 40, they said, you must be joking. There is nothing that brings together those women in that wide an age range. But we wanted to go to 60. We wanted to deal with things like pregnancy, menopause, all the stuff that we don't talk about, all those big changes. We also wanted to say, actually, the normal pattern of activity is to stop and go back, have a break and go back. And sport is really rubbish at doing that. It tends to treat you as if you're either in or you're out. And if you do take a few weeks off or a few months off, when you go back, then usually the people around you are there with their arms folded saying, oh, where have you been then? Not, it's great to have you back, let's carry on. So we wanted to do something about that too. So our creative this time was to find the successor to Missy Elliott, and that was really hard because the music had defined the first campaign. And the agency FCB Inferno did a brilliant job by finding this poem by Maya Angelou called Phenomenal Woman, about what it was like to be a woman. And I can remember when they rang me, when they'd found this, and she read it to me over the phone, and it felt like it was written for us. It was written in the 60s, but it really felt like it was written for us. But we still wanted the campaign to be recognizable because we built up a really big community, particularly digitally, of women who felt this was their campaign as much as it was ours, so it had to be recognizable. So we had a fantastic Australian director first time round called Kim Gehrig. She gave us a wonderful treatment, so we went back to her. We knew we wanted to keep that picture of real women, and we knew the women would give us the story. Whatever we did for the script for the advert, actually, when you go out and talk to the women and you film them, they tell the story. And that is exactly what happened.
3, 2, 1.
Ready?
Right. Many people wonder where my secret lies. I'm not cute or built to suit a fashion model size. When I start to tell them, they think I'm telling lies. But I say, I'm a woman. Phenomenally. It's in the reach of my arms, the span of my hips, the stride of my step, the curl of my lips. It's the fire in my eyes, the flash of my teeth, the swing in my waist, the joy in my feet. Because I'm a woman. Phenomenally. Phenomenal woman. It ought to make you proud. That's my mother and my grandmothers and my great-grandmothers and your greats and my great-greats and all you women and me.
ready.
So a key part of the brief was to make me cry. And they managed it with that ad, because I'd cried when I'd seen the first one. And so when we were testing the creative for the second, I kept saying, it's got to get you here. It's really got to get you here. And finally, when we got to that point, it did that. But the out of home really then reinforced the messages. And a lot of the messages in the out of home were from the women's stories. So this is Sue, the woman who says amazing at the end. She swims every morning of the year in Tooting Lido, every single morning. So when she got in that pool, she was just doing what she would normally do. We wanted proper ethnic diversity in these ads. We'd done pretty well first time, we wanted to do better second time round. And finding a woman who wears a hijab, who is happy to be photographed exercising and put into this kind of public domain took a little while, but we did, and we were absolutely delighted that Fakira agreed to be in the ad, kickboxing. The motherhood thing was important. Stephanie and Anna, who were on here, both brought their babies to the launch at BAFTA of the campaign, which was amazing. Incidentally, the woman in the ad who's holding the towel was literally giving birth, because what Kim wanted to show was the strength of women, that we trust our bodies to do amazing things, but we don't always trust it when we're playing sport and when we're exercising. And then this is Debbie, who was our Blade Runner, and we wanted to make sure that we could show all body shapes and sizes and types. And it was very brave of Debbie, who'd lost her leg, I think after meningitis, to be filmed. But she adored running before she was sick, and she wanted to run afterwards. And this is Lydia, who is tiny. And you can probably see that when you see the piece in the film. Lydia's about 4'8" and had absolutely hated, loathed, and detested sport all through school because of her height. And when she discovered roller derby, she suddenly discovered being small was the best possible thing. She just zoomed under everybody. And hearing Lydia tell those stories, particularly to younger girls, was really very inspiring. So the response to this, we all held our breath, but people did like it. We did see 28 million views online. We got over 200 pieces of editorial coverage. Second time round, which is much harder because people knew what we were about by then. We have an amazingly engaged digital community, 750,000 people in our digital community. They're very, very supportive. They tweet, they talk all the time to each other. And most importantly, we have changed behaviour. So our latest results, and these just came through a couple of weeks ago, nearly 5 million women have taken some kind of action across the population as a whole as a result of being engaged with the campaign. 3 million of those have done some exercise, the others have talked about it, supported other people, and 1.5 million have started. So the figures are great, but the thing that matters most to me is these two very quick stories I want to tell you. So one is about the Jessica Ennis end of the spectrum. When we launched the campaign, we wanted supporters, and we really wanted supporters from sport too. So I briefed a number of elite athletes and household names, and I'm not going to give you the name of this woman, but we talked her through the stories, we showed her the insight, we showed her some of the pictures. And she said, and she's a multi-gold medal winning athlete, I said, you won't quite, I know you'll appreciate this, but you won't feel like this. And she said, oh no, every single time I've been on a start line, other than 2012 when I knew I was in the shape of my life, I've looked round at the other women and thought, they're better than me, they're fitter than me, they've trained harder than me, and they're going to beat me. And that was a multi-medal winning athlete. And at the other end of the spectrum, when we were in the middle of doing the creative work for the campaign, I was training for the Moonwalk, the fundraising walk for women with breast cancer. And it's only a walk, but it is 26 miles long in the middle of the night, so you do have to train. And I was out on one of my longest training walks. And just when I was about the furthest point from home, I was walking in front of a parade of shops, and some man came to the door and shouted something completely unrepeatable at me. And I was so shocked that I didn't quite know what to do. But I went home, and I didn't tell my husband because I was embarrassed. I cried a lot, and I didn't train for another 2 weeks. And then I thought, for God's sake, Jenny, this is for charity, get over yourself. So I went back out. But I did think, if me at my age, with my job, can be made to feel like that, we really do need to do something about this. And that's why I think this campaign's important. Thank you very much.